The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-host and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on our live shows.
Broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network. The bandwidth for this episode of This Week in Guns is sponsored by Patriot Patch Company. PatriotPatch.co.
Welcome to This Week in Guns. This show is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network and Patriot Patch Company.
And the show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Shawn Heron. It is my pleasure to introduce our panelists tonight. First up, he's the creator of the Mayday safety app, Rocket FFL, Rocket CCW, best-selling author of the Long Range Shooting Handbook, host of Trigger Words on the Firearms Radio Network, host of the Going Ballistic podcast, and newly minted children's book author. We've got Ryan Cleckner in the house. Ryan, welcome back.
That makes me tired just listening to you describe it. I'm so happy to be back, man.
I honestly got so tired reading it that I almost thought that I was reading two things. I was like, this can't possibly be one person.
And I always make time to come on This Week in Guns. Thanks, man.
Thanks. Appreciate you. Next up, we got class clown and instructor at Dark Angel Medical. Please welcome back Mike Doc Rohan. Mike?
Wow, that intro was significantly shorter. You're welcome, listeners and watchers.
Would you just like to add a few things right now, like a driver of a Subaru?
When pressured, I could eat an entire pizza by myself.
That's awesome. I can do it when I'm not pressured. I just, I'm hangry. That's just how it is. Guys, welcome to the show. Before we get started, let's talk real quick about our sponsors, Patriot Patch Company. I'm just going to keep it simple, short, and quick this week. Go to patriotpatch.co, sign up for the Patch of the Month Club, and get awesome, funny morale patches every single month in the mail without having to do anything. It's like Columbia House for patches, except trust me, you want all of these. You're not going to be sending back Purple Rain or anything like that. And also, we have our good friends over at Manticore Arms. Use coupon code TWG10. Lots of new stuff coming out. They just added a new butt pad for their sliding stock for the Scorpion Evo. So go check that out as well. Coupon code TWG10 at manticorearms.com. Let's get into the starting of these stories. Brady Group launches ad campaign to prevent family fire shootings. Did you guys watch this?
I did. Yeah. I'll hear your guys' thoughts, and then you can give my unadulterated thoughts on this one.
Ryan, have you seen this?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the Brady campaign, so I hate everything they do.
Yeah.
That being said, they did it the wrong way, but I think that we should be focusing on especially accidental issues. That's why I just literally wrote a book about it to try and educate parents and educate kids at the same time. So, I mean, good motivation, bad judgment. Is that the category I can put it in?
I think that's fair. Mike?
Yeah, so, I'm watching it, and I'm like, okay, I agree with the message. Am I watching the beginning of a horror movie?
That is exactly how I felt.
I mean, the whole time I'm just like, And then, of course, I'm watching it, and I see this butcher knife just sitting out on the counter, and I'm like, well, are we going to lock up the knives too? But I'm all about, firearm safety. So the way that they did it just gave me the creeps. It
was so creepy. And so Ryan actually mentioned it, and I want to just kind of reiterate, like, you just did write a book about accidents and safety that caters towards children. This one I actually went into with an open mind. I was like, okay, this is a good thing. I can't see how this could be a negative commercial. And then they introduced the Child of the Corn, and I don't know exactly. It was just a really creepy and tough to watch commercial. But Ryan, tell us about your approach to firearm safety with kids.
Well, I think my approach is to trick parents into thinking it's a kid's book, and really it's a book for the parents. There's my secret right there. I think that any parent that says, oh, don't worry, it's unloaded, or, oh, they don't know where it is kidding themselves. There were things your parents thought they had hidden from you, and you knew where they were. That doesn't work. If there are kids around, I don't think they should be able to put a finger on a firearm without direct adult supervision. So that means the gun is either in your control or it's locked away. And even if you don't think you're going to have kids over, do you have nieces and nephews? Do you have those kind of things? You need to think about that. So the message in the book talks about how accidents can happen, but things that break can be fixed, things that are spilled can be cleaned up, but an accident with a firearm is something that can't easily be replaced or fixed. And I try and sneak in at the very end, not to hide that that's a firearm safety book, but just to not beat people over the head with, Timmy the AR-15 talks about gun safety. Instead, I try to make it a book that, families want to read, and then sneak in there at the end, hey, parents, this is your responsibility. Let's do something about it. So we'll see how it goes.
Ryan, remind everyone who's listening what the name of the book is and where they can find it.
Well, the name of the book is really blunt. It's Firearm Safety is No Accident, and you can find it on Amazon. So I'd appreciate you guys checking it out. And if you don't have kids or you don't think it's for you, give it as a gift to somebody else. I'm trying to do, unlike the Brady campaign, I'm happy to have this book for anti-gun or non-gun people. I know I might get boos and hisses from people, but they need to be educated about firearms and firearm safety just like everybody else does. So we'll see how it goes.
Totally agree. And then just the final thing is, it's funny how they can take what seems to be a genuine safety issue that both sides can probably agree on, that this is a terrible thing, and just make it so incredibly insulting to one side while catering to the other side. That's awful. So go buy Ryan's book, and sorry, Brady campaign, struck out on this one. Next story. Study finds CCW holders are 6 times more law-abiding than police. This comes to us from the Duh files. Not really a big surprise. Is anyone surprised by this at all?
No, my show notes for this, literally I wrote duh and then expound. It was duh, ... expound.
Now, I know we've talked about this one before, Ryan, because this is an article from 2016. I just thought it's always interesting to kind of go revisit some of this stuff. And yeah, I still think that this holds true even today.
It does. And one of my pet peeves, of course, when I'm debating somebody anti-gun and they say, well, only police should have guns. One argument is, wait, didn't you liberal just call all police Hitler, and now you want them to only be the ones with guns? Taking that argument and not addressing that, just saying cops are amazing. They're heroes. However, they're not near as trained as people think they are. So not only do they have accidents, not only do they have that kind of training, they're human beings too. And it is nice to see the stat that's out there to show people that, you know what? Regular old citizens are safer and maybe better to have armed at all places than maybe all the cops are.
Yeah. Next story from the WOW files. Florida stand your ground shooter will face charges in deadly encounter. So I've watched this video a couple times. I've read about it. Basically what happens is there's a clerk or a worker at a convenience store. Man and woman come in, park illegally. They, excuse me, man goes into the store. Clerk goes out, starts yelling at the woman for parking in a handicap spot. Man comes out, pushes the guy down, starts to walk away. Man on the ground. The clerk draws his firearm, shoots the guy mortally, wounding him. And now the stand your ground law does not apply in this case. And he's been charged with manslaughter. So, Mike, start us out. What are your thoughts here?
Well, twofold. So I went to kind of research more of this, and CNN had an article on it, and they were talking about all of the other times that this guy has had an issue in parking lots with road rage. And I'm like, okay, because I wanted to give this guy the benefit of the doubt initially. And I scrolled, read, a couple paragraphs, scrolled some more, and it's like 8 separate incidences with this guy. And there's nothing to me that sounds like stand your ground. There's no self-defense. This guy has just repeatedly either flashed his gun or set himself up for, literally talking to the police, where the police have searched his vehicle and found the guns in multiple instances. And that just doesn't happen. I get mad at people on the roads all the time, but as it turns out, cops don't end up searching my vehicle after I flip them off. Like this guy, I don't know, Violent Little Machine Shop sells a "You Park Like an A-Hole" sticker. It's an eggshell sticker. I do that. If I see someone like that, I slap that sticker on there and I move on with my day. I don't need to get in personal fights with every single person that parks bad at Walmart.
Yeah.
It would be an unending quest.
It really would. It would be like it would be like the Crusades, but the parking Crusades. Ryan?
Well, just like about everything else, I can kind of flip-flop or argue both sides on this one. One is his past of getting into incidents and altercations. yes, it is influential to us when we're talking about it, but when it comes down to like the legal side of it, that really shouldn't matter here, right? I mean, he could have been wrong every time before and been right this time. I'm not saying that that's good, but it's hard. It's easy for me to see the past and assume, but then it's kind of hard at the same time, because what if he was a jerk 8 times in a row and this time his life really was in danger? Would we take away his right to self-defense because he was a jerk before? Now, that being said, I think if you're going to carry a gun and have a firearm, you should be prepared, maybe, don't get mad at everybody, I'm saying maybe, to have someone spit in your face and not draw your gun, to take a punch to the face and even get, stumble back a step or two and not draw your gun. Maybe. I'm not saying always take a punch. The situation dictates what's going on here. But if you were not in the immediate fear of your life or somebody else's life being in danger, you need to not have enough of an ego that to happen. You need to be able to take a bruise of somebody, quote unquote, offending you and be able to walk away and not pull your gun and take someone's life, because that's still a human being no matter what happens.
Yeah, that's 100% valid point to not look at his history. You got the whole boy who cried wolf thing, but at the same time, you're right, and that was my issue is not knowing exactly what happened. And he said that he feared for his life, but when I throw on a gun or when I throw on a med kit or I put my knives on and I go out and my flashlight and my tactical spinner and
right,
I don't go out looking to get into an altercation. And even if I do get into an altercation, just like you said, it literally has to escalate to the point where I do need to use a knife, or I'm not driving around looking for car crashes. That's an ambulance's job, but I still carry a med kit. And I think, unfortunately, this guy set himself up for failure with his past history, whether this was a true incident or not.
I think you're right. That's why we need to be careful. We need to be good stewards of our community. And you need to not have this kind of a problem where you're willing to jump into fights like that. I just ask yourself that, folks. If you're carrying a gun, are you willing to be socially offended and still not get into a fight? Can you have a drink spilled on you? Can you be smacked? Can you be whatever in the right circumstance and still walk away? If you can, awesome, carry a gun. If you can't, maybe you shouldn't.
Yeah, totally agree. I had a long discussion today. I was like, the 4 criteria for self-defense: jeopardy, ability, opportunity, and in some states, preclusion. Like, that guy did not advance on him. So drawing the firearm, that I'm not sure I would have done it, but I'm not going to criticize the guy for it. But that guy never advanced towards him. He never made another menacing move towards him, and he pulled that trigger. And that's the part for me that's like, yeah, he made the mistake, and he is guilty, in my opinion, based on what I know, what I've seen.
And people need to remember too that just because someone did something doesn't mean they're going to do it again. So if somebody swung at you with a bat, let's say, that could be lethal force. Absolutely, that could be lethal force. Okay, let's say they swung at you with the bat and then threw the bat really far away. You can't pull out a gun and shoot them because they did something to you that was potentially lethal force. It's already over with. You can only pull out your gun to stop it from happening again.
Yep. And I will say there, we do hear stories sometimes of people dying from getting one punch to the right place in their head.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this whole thing so incredibly sensitive and so incredibly on a razor's edge for us, because you never know what's going to happen. You take that one punch, it ends up putting you in a coma for the rest of your life. You never know. But in this case specifically, that guy did not advance. That guy did not deserve to be shot, in my opinion.
Right.
All right. Good talk, guys. Next story that we have going on here is Fifth Circuit rules man was unlawfully terminated for having a gun in his car at work. This comes to us from guns.com. This is in the state of Mississippi. Guy had a completely legal firearm locked in his glove box of his vehicle on company property. Company found out, they terminated him that day, and then had a company or a plant-wide meeting talking about him being a threat, and if anyone saw him, to call 911. He took them to court for wrongful discharge and defamation. That was rejected in the U.S. District Court. On appeal to the Fifth Circuit, they basically said that, that the at-will employment doctrine is not absolute, and that the gun law came out on top. Ryan, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts here?
Well, no matter how much I don't like the idea of a workplace banning firearms, that's, in some places, their right to do so. The problem when people ban firearms in the parking lot is you've effectively banned the firearm from their entire life. That's where I have a big problem with it, right? So I don't want to force onto anyone something they don't want to do. So, okay, fine. You're going to be a cupcake factory that doesn't allow firearms inside. But if you do it in the parking lot, now that guy can't have a firearm driving to work. He can't have a firearm when he's leaving work and maybe stopping at the grocery store. He can't have a firearm anywhere else. I have an absolute problem with that. What do you guys think?
Mike?
Yeah, so one thing that was really cool, the last Air Force base I was stationed at before I got out actually made it where I could file for my concealed carry onto base, which is really, really unusual for most bases in the military. Specifically, though, when I went into my workplace, I had to lock it up in my vehicle. So exactly what you're saying, coming to and from work, especially flying late, I'd get home at like 3 a.m. and I may be hungry, and now I got to go to a gas station at 3 a.m. with my gun at home. And they recognized that was a huge issue. So they fixed that. So I'm looking at this guy, and this guy had it properly locked up in his car. The policy of the parking lot, I think, is rough. But what's worse about this whole article is the immediate defamation, right? Yep. Not the email to some managers, just like, hey, we terminated this guy. Just keep an eye out for him and alert security. But to hold a company-wide conference saying that just because this person owns a firearm, he's a threat to everyone's safety, and to call 911, not to alert leadership, but to call 911, which immediately sets this guy up for like terroristic acts, being charged against him, and confiscation and jail time, where all he did was lock his firearm up in his car like almost everyone does. And it's almost worth taking heed that, yeah, it worked out for him right now, but how's his court fees? How's his everything else that's going on in his life since basically his workplace said that he was a potential active shooter that was fired.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree with both you guys. This is completely unacceptable. These kind of rules make no sense whatsoever to me. In fact, it would almost be, if I did work at a place like that, it would almost make sense for me to park, off site and then ride my bicycle to the front doors or something like that. Just completely unacceptable. But when I was in corporate America, I kept a gun in my car on the property, and I knew if anyone found out, if it ever came to light or anything like that, that I would be immediately fired. And I was completely 100% okay with that. I'm not going to give up the rest of my life or the opportunity to save my own life because they're stupid rules.
There you go.
All right. The next story comes to us from the LOL files. Dallas Mayor Pro Tem that opposed NRA annual meetings pleads guilty to corruption charges. This doesn't really have anything to do with anything. And just because he's anti-gun doesn't mean he's a criminal or corrupt or anything like that. It just seemed to work out in this case. But I know that this guy was in the news a lot before the National Rifle Association annual meetings in Dallas. He was the acting mayor pro tem and basically didn't want them to come there, didn't want the NRA in town, made a big deal out of it, but nothing ever actually happened with it. Anyway, he got charged with basically federal charges. Let's see. It was conspiracy and tax evasion charges involving $450,000 in bribe and kickback payments stemming from securing a city school bus stop arm camera contract for a Louisiana company. So turns out that the guy was a scumbag, and again, has no correlation to him not wanting the NRA in Dallas, but just thought it was interesting and people might be interested in that. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah. Not only is it ironic and it's funny, but for us as gun owners to see this is schadenfreude for us, but it also goes into the category of gun owners largely are law-abiding people, right? You have Leland Yee from like 5 or 6 years ago. Do you guys remember him, the California senator?
Definitely.
Sure do.
Seriously anti-gun, and then he got in trouble for literally running guns.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes into that category of not only are gun owners largely good people, but that some of these extreme liberals that are out there want to have two separate sets of laws. They want to have they want socialism as long as their imaginary view of socialism has them in charge. They don't want to follow the rules. They don't ever imagine themselves as one of the workers or as one of the normal people. They imagine themselves at the top, and that comes out in decisions they make in life, like this one.
Yeah, you mean the definition of failed communism, where the leaders think they're above and make money and all that, and that's why communism fails? We're seeing it? No, No.
I would love to have a chart of like every title or class or category you could have in a socialist government. Just a printed out chart. And then every time someone goes for socialism, I'd like to hold up the chart and say, where do you picture yourself? And I bet that they imagine themselves in that top 1%. But anyway.
Yeah. Surprised at all. So, good for him. I'm glad that he got his payday, but we'll see where it goes from there. Next up, we have felon acquitted of murder charges has a right to self-defense, will still face gun charges though. So this brings up kind of a little bit of a conundrum. So this guy had been robbed by another guy. Obviously they had some beef going on. The guy came in. The Augusta man that was accused of murder was acquitted. He was shooting while running away because he didn't want to get shot in the back. Anyway, his rounds came in contact. Everything there happened and definitely acquitted, but now he's going to face gun charges because he was a felon and he had a firearm. So I always say that, in Colorado, signs don't hold force of law. I mean, you're still trespassing, but it's not like you're going to get a felony charge if you go into a place that has a no gun sign posted on their door. But I understand that if I was to make a big deal out of it, get arrested, it would be trespassing with a firearm, whatever that charge may be. I understand that. Yep. So this guy is probably alive because he had this firearm and he shot it behind him as he was running away. It probably gave him enough cover to actually get away. So the question then becomes, was it worth it? He's probably going to do time, probably a large amount of time being a felon with a firearm that committed a homicide, whether he got acquitted for it or not. But ultimately at the end of the day, do we think that it was worth it? And I'll start with you, Mike.
Yeah, it kind of boils back to the, don't start none, won't get none kind of thing with the dude in the parking lot, because the more I read on this is that the person that he ended up with the self-defense, I'm doing air quotes for everyone listening, he went to him. So he brought, the fight to the guy after he was robbed the same day. He went to him, but he just happened to be running away with that gun and firing. I don't carry a firearm in places that I'm not allowed to carry. I fly literally almost twice a week. So obviously I'm not carrying a firearm on the airplane with me. I just taught a class in New Jersey, and I'm not going to throw my felony bullets out the airplane window. So, it's just making your own personal determination on what you're willing to take law wise. Obviously this guy's a felon, but on my end, med kit, a knife and a flashlight is what I carry a large amount of the time when I can't carry a firearm. And I feel if I don't go after these fights, if I don't try and fight someone in a parking lot or go after a guy who robbed me, then generally I can avoid most of these situations with good situational awareness.
I like it. Ryan?
Well said, Mike. I'm a big believer. There's an article somewhere I wrote on it that the more important part about self-defense is defending for yourself. It's not necessarily attacking. That's why they call it self-defense. So, yeah, he's a felon. He shouldn't have been in possession of a firearm. Whether we agree with that law or not, that's what the law is. I agree he looked like he might have been going out of his way to instigate the issue. That's a problem. But a firearm is not the only way to defend yourself. One way is to avoid fights. That's the way to defend yourself. Another way is to use different types of weapons. You could either have no weapon, or so you could have a taser, you could have a knife, you could have something like that. And then, of course, the medical training I think people out there need to really focus on is if your idea of self-defense only involves you practicing for offense, I think you're preparing for the wrong thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wonder ultimately if he thinks that it was worth it. I mean, he's probably alive because he had the firearm, but he's probably going to jail because he had the firearm. I wonder if the trade-off was worth it for him.
Yeah. And that's kind of the conversation that a lot of people, again, like I said, just need to have with themselves about, what's worth it in the long run. Does this guy have a family that, once again, being a felon, I'm assuming he did go to prison earlier. Once again, his family goes without support, and is his family being raised potentially to become felons themselves without health care, without pay and being able to support your family because you went after that fight, even though you got self-defense. So it's tough,
Yeah, It sure is. Next story: man shot outside of strip club drives himself to the hospital. This is from the Orlando Sentinel and has literally zero information whatsoever. Says that a man basically got shot near a strip club, drove himself to the hospital. They got there. They said there were indications of a shooting were located on scene, but no one else was there. No indication of any information in the story. But I kind of wondered to myself where the injury was, what kind of injury it was, and how he was able to drive 2.5 miles. Do you guys have any thoughts on this, Mike?
I like to assume that he just finished up a Dark Angel medical course, and he was shot several times. He threw on some chest seals, packed a femoral bleed with hemostatic gauze, threw on a tourniquet, and he's like, I ain't got time to bleed, and then spit, and then literally drove to the hospital. Yeah, I look at this with a complete lack of information. And I just have to assume that, he was super awesome and took a medical course with us, because that's the only way he could have survived, in my opinion.
Definitely love it, man. Ryan?
Not enough info, man.
I know. I was just like, is this a story? Like, I don't even understand why they published this. But August 9th, 2018, 5:35 a.m. they did. So
I guess the point is stay in the fight. Don't give up.
Yes.
Majority of people that get shot survive. So,
Yeah.
Don't get hit and fall down on the ground.
Yep.
Do whatever you can. Yeah.
It reminds me of Jared Reston, if you guys have heard of his story, where he was a responding police officer and was shot multiple times, including in the head face region. But that stay in the fight, he was able to return fire and win the day and go home.
And get away from the strip club. Because if the story is man shot and dies in front of a strip club, that's a much sadder story.
True.
It is a sad story,
He
especially
may
because
have just passed the hospital on his way to getting away from the strip club.
Especially because there's clearly no witnesses in this story.
Yeah.
Right. So man shot and died outside a strip club all alone by himself with no one, no friends.
And
the strippers didn't even come out to see him.
He had dollar bills stuffed in the bullet holes, though. They tried to help.
That's good.
Tried to help. Yeah, it's as good as a tampon. Oh.
Love it. All right, next story, a sad one. 2 officers are among 4 killed in latest Canada shooting. This was an ambush shooting. Got calls about gunfire and showed up and were taken down. So I guess what I find interesting about this is, Canada, of course, you can't legislate away evil. Doesn't matter. People are going to use whatever tool they have. But the second to last paragraph in the story says Friday's shooting was the latest eruption of gun violence across the country in Canada. Gun laws in Canada are stricter than in the United States, but a proliferation of weapons has led to an increase in gun-related crimes in recent years. Ryan, thoughts on this?
Yes. More guns equals more gun crimes. Now,
yes.
Everyone definitely just gasped there. I'm sorry, gun community.
It's true.
Sure, of course. If you have a bunch of guns around, there's going to be some gun crimes. The problem is I get so frustrated, as you can tell me getting animated right now, is I try to ask people that want to debate about guns. I want to ask them, are you interested in stopping gun violence, or are you interested in stopping all violence? Because if you're interested in stopping gun violence, break out the magic wand and make all guns disappear. Gun violence will stop. But you'll have many more victims of other types of violence, like we see in Australia, because now victims can't defend themselves. So that whole gun violence stat drives me nuts, because they try to equate it to the number of guns out there or the lax gun laws, and therefore make it seem like it's a bad thing without taking into account other countries where people are stoned to death or thrown off the top of buildings or raped or things like that, that guns can actually help. So it would make my day if we stopped worrying about gun violence and started worrying about all violence, like, 9/11 from box cutters, like Boston Marathon bombings, like a bomber in Austin, things like that.
Agreed. Mike?
No, he covered it. That's what I took away from this was just, A, unfortunate, for the police officers, but then B, that last sentence irked me, because I'm like, yeah, this is, what a story. And then I'm like, are you kidding?
Yeah, I was shocked as well. And this came to us from Reuters via MSN News. But ultimately, we see the slippery slope that this starts people down. Okay, if they get what they want, and then we do ban guns or make them incredibly difficult to get. We see in England, we see now it's knives. Now knives are the thing that people are killing with because they've taken away guns for the most part. They go on to knives.
Yeah.
They want to ban knives and make that more difficult. It's just a slippery slope, and it
Well,
clearly doesn't work.
well, I was stationed in England from 2009 to 2011. Knives were already banned. Unless you were a chef or it was part of your job, you couldn't be anywhere in the country with a knife on you. I got stabbed in England, and so unless it was a chef that got like really mad at me, I don't, I look at it the same concept. What's banning it doing? They're going to find another way. Are we going to ban Penske trucks next? I'm shrugging for people who are listening.
Yeah, it's just this ridiculous slippery slope. But also, you got stabbed in England.
I sure did. Yeah, and that hospital story cracked me up because I literally, young medic, didn't have my med kit on me because why would I? Most people don't.
Yep. And
it dawned on me that day. I was like, holy cow, what a terrible, terrible medic I am that I got all this knowledge and I don't have any medical supplies. So I took my sock off, stuffed my abdomen, and I drove to the hospital, which was about an hour and a half away. So I was laughing. I'm like, hey, look at this.
This was Mike. And actually, I think it shows what an awesome medic you are because you're like, whatever, I don't even need medical supplies. A dirty sock, that's all I need.
Yeah, it was about a 3-day-old sock. So that was fun. The surgeon loved that. He's like, really? I'm like, well, that's what I had.
So, Ryan, I kind of put this one in here because I thought you might have something to say about it. Rifle imports hit lowest level in 7 years. 7-year low in 2017 talks about how Savage Arms has a plant in Ontario, ships more than 97% of their inventory to the United States. Russian imports have tanked 71% over 2016, and this is 2017 we're talking about. In 2016, dealers bought more than 28,000 rifles from Russia, and that plunged to 8,500 last year. German, Israeli, and Serbian imports declined by more than half. Rifle imports from Taiwan vanished. Like, okay, that's fine. But Ryan, do you have thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think it's an indication of import issues with different countries. We have sanctions or issues like that with Russia, and you have a influx of inexpensive firearms here domestically. So you don't need to go get that cheap SKS for somebody now at a gun show when you get in the AR-15 for $400 at the gun show. That's one reason. Another reason is the entire industry, as of this past, I don't know, maybe year, has started to really decline. Not because guns aren't popular, but because everybody bought the next 5 years worth of guns already. And they don't need to buy any more. And you have things like Savage, as one example, they will send their receivers out for work to their Canadian plant and then back in again. So the same gun will go out and back. Other manufacturers do that also for different components of the gun. Sometimes it's cheaper. And you have these manufacturers are starting to tighten their belts and streamline a little bit. So sometimes they're not sending them out of the country anymore because it's ending up costing too much. So would I be worried about it? No. I think this is kind of par for the course. And rifles already aren't imported very much anyway. So don't panic, anybody. Be thankful that we're doing domestic production of things. That's good for the American firearms industry. We'll be fine.
I got to say, though, it does kind of suck for the AK fans out there and stuff like that because those Russian imports, or not just AK fans, but those Russian guns, that's a pretty huge decline.
It is, but it doesn't suck for the AK fans because this isn't something that somebody's doing to the AK fans. This is the AK fans not buying enough guns to justify importing more.
There you go. Mike?
Does that make sense? Yeah.
It does, yes.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what he said, just based on we've got the guns that we want, and the new guns that we want are American made, which I'm okay with. I still do not have a Russian made AK. I will get one at some point, and therefore I will contribute to one import from Russia. But yeah, it's just not in droves because you can go and get the cheapest gun out there and it'll run well. So, yeah. That's
man arrested in New Mexico compound was training kids to be school shooters. So this is a very interesting story. The headline here on Fox News: man arrested at extremist Muslim New Mexico compound, training kids to commit school shootings, documents show. Basically had kidnapped his own son from Georgia, taken him there. It appears that son had died at some point, and a 3-year-old's remains were found there. And that is speculation just because they haven't identified positively yet if that child was his. but other kids there living in squalor, hungry, and being trained, tactical training, to be school shooters, it appears. Still a pretty new story. This guy was actually released on bail because the prosecution apparently didn't paint a good enough picture of him being a danger. But Mike, what are your thoughts on kind of this whole thing as it unveils itself here?
I look at this thing and I saw it pop up on my newsfeed a couple days ago, and I thought, holy cow. And then I started looking at news across the country and didn't really see anything. And it's starting to gain a little bit of traction, but it's crazy. I lived in New Mexico. There's plenty of places where this is possible. I'd like to know more about, what this training was, because every article that you read just talks about the living conditions, the squalor, the body found. And they say that they were getting trained in school shootings. Well, if they're getting trained in school shootings, how can you then say in the exact same sentence, he doesn't appear to be a danger, so we're going to release him on bail?
Yeah.
It just, the whole thing just reeks of just insanity. Especially the connections to the September 11th. I think it was his dad that did not September 11th. I'm sorry. The original World Trade Center bombings. And then he's just like, if you were to look at this web of connections that this dude out in the middle of the desert in New Mexico has to some of the more major terrorist acts in the United States, and then to release him on bail and to not get national media coverage 24/7 on what this is, how this happened, who are these children. I'm at a loss for words because I don't have info, because the info is just not being dug up. It's insane. There's not a rug big enough that could cover something like this.
Yeah. Ryan?
This right here is our problem. I mean, the judge that did this, she has a history of having either low or no bails for violent offenders for liberal causes. If there's ever someone that she would call a minority or things like that, she lets them off. I didn't even know he got let off with bail. I thought it was just his signature, and it was like $30 for him to promise to pay to come back. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I heard. So I don't think it's as much as not enough facts. Maybe there were, or not enough evidence. Maybe there wasn't. But this judge trying to do political activism by letting him off, this is sickening. Here's a shameless plug, but just trying to explain why we're doing it. The reason why I've stopped every other project that seems like I'm trying to do when I'm doing Mayday safety is this right here. We cannot count on the system to help protect us from this. That person was literally let back out. And people like to laugh at President Trump or laugh at other people that say, we have terrorists out here right now with training camps or are plotting against us. And people, that could possibly be true. Here it is. There's got to be 100 more out there. And they're training and thinking very hard every day how they're going to hurt us and change our way of life. And we need to do the best we can to protect it. So we need to reinforce our schools. We need to have better systems in place. We need to take this seriously. This is a warning. I hate to say this, but I'm going to be at a point very soon where I don't want to say I told you so, but these are the kind of things that are going to haunt us.
Yeah. And what's gun control going to do with gun buybacks? Do you think the guy who's living in the desert with children, he's going to turn in his guns? He's going to wait until they're old enough, after he's trained them, go enroll them in a public school, and then off they go with these mystery guns that no one knew even existed. Even if they somehow get every gun off the street, you're not getting them out of the middle of the desert. This guy, I am dumbfounded that they're not even this kid that's just buried in the desert, children being trained. How is this not like mega national news?
Yeah, it's tough. And I've read a couple other stories that this guy, the guy running the whole thing, the 39-year-old, was taking some tactical training from some places in Georgia. So another guy kind of using that knowledge that he had gained for evil. More is going to come out about this. I agree with both you guys. This is just the beginning here. Obviously, they see what they see what affects the zeitgeist of our population and our society, and they're going to target those things. So yeah,
Yep.
This is a scary time. I heard that it was a $20,000 bond, and then they would have to do 10% of that. So it is a very small amount.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Let's see. Pennsylvania troopers are overwhelmed by a determined suspect. I actually watched this video, and wow, this is a really tough video to watch, honestly. This is a fight for their lives. August 10th, 2008 is when this article came out, but this is basically the guy gets pulled over. The cops go up and they do their communication with him, and eventually it looks like they're going to just let him go, but then they think that he might be under the influence of something, get him out, do a field sobriety test. Then they decide that they're going to put him in handcuffs at that point. And that's when everything goes wrong. The guy starts fighting. This is a battle for their lives. Originally they're tasing and tasing and tasing, can't get the handcuffs on him. Then there's punches thrown. Just this guy was a tough guy, and they were battling for their lives. Eventually gets away from them, goes back to his car, gets a firearm. They exchange a bunch of shots. One of the cops is hit, femoral artery dissection. The guy gets off and drives away. I think I saw that it lasted a little bit over a minute. The gunfight, 41 seconds, 47 shots were exchanged between the two of them. Terrifying video. Mike, thoughts on this?
Yeah. So I saw this video a few days ago, and the whole time I was watching it brings heed to a lot of different things. And there's so many different things. You could do an entire show on the dissection of this video. And, point number one being, our police officers doing their best, but need to train more, and your department training isn't enough. The arm holds, the bars, all this guy did was just post out and resist, and two officers couldn't get him down to throw handcuffs on him. So beyond that, then they resorted to tasers, and they tased and they tased and they tased. And it's just, we rely on these, secondary non-lethal, and they were ineffective. And so knowing what to do as a police officer, what's next after ineffective. And I'm not a police officer. I've never been one. So I don't want to armchair quarterback this thing, but I watch it and I say, this is your job to be, to protect and serve. So the hand-to-hand, the combative skills, subpar. Then going into the gunfight, allowing him to get into his front driver window and reach and grab a firearm. Well, now we're in gunfight. And this is where you expect police officers to be able to succeed, because, my God, everyone should give up their guns. The cops will protect them. And these cops were shot. Fast forward past that, and I look at it, and I just taught a classroom full of cops in New Jersey, and there was a couple guys who were like, why am I here? And it's like this right here. Okay. That femoral artery that was lacerated, you can lose a liter of blood in a minute, and you can be unconscious in that amount of time or less. And so if no one's there to take care of you, if no one's there to pack a wound or put a tourniquet on after you've won that gunfight, which they did, then, who is there to take care of you? Are you going to bleed out? Are you going to die based on your lack of training? Not to say that, again, I'm not armchair quarterbacking these guys, but this whole video, I was just kind of, sitting back going, when's he going to get taken down? He's not getting taken. Oh my God, he's got a gun. And then watching it unfold. And it's just an all too realistic view of what cops face every day, between domestic calls and traffic stops. This is their most dangerous moment. And so for folks watching this who may not see cops on the regular, this is their biggest concern all day, every day, pulling someone over.
Ryan?
Yeah, that's one of the points I made in that article too. I completely agree with Mike. Is if you're sitting there bleeding out, looking at the dead bad guy, does that mean you won? Right? So stop fantasizing about killing the other guy before you die, because you could be dying next. You need medical training after that. The other is, people don't just fall over and they get shot like it looks like in the movies and TV. Be prepared to shoot. a bad guy a couple times in the chest and maybe a couple times in the face and still have the bad guy come at you and beat the snot out of you. You need to train. You need to not put all your trust in just the firearm or just one tool. You need to figure out how to fight. And, I hear questions from guys all the time about, especially when they go for hunting, for like backpacking hunting, or they want to go long range shooting, like, hey, what's the lightest rifle I can get? I want to get, my 7-pound rifle's too heavy. I want a 6-pound rifle. What can I do there? And they want to spend all this money on a lighter gun. And they're offended when I ask them what they've done to take more than 1 pound off their own body. Right? So maybe instead of getting the new G-Wiz lightweight whatever, spend some time in the gym or spend some time taking some courses on medical training from Mike. Take some courses on this and be prepared to quote unquote win the gunfight and still have someone attacking you.
Yeah. Yeah, I just look at this and there's been a lot of articles on it, and I hate to keep harping medical, but my God, it happens. But looking back at like the gun owners being the most responsible people and being lawful and abiding, I chuckle because I'm like, most of my courses, not my courses, Dark Angel courses, are filled with concealed carriers who've now recognized I see a lot of car crashes and bullets fly both ways. So you see this sort of thing, and literally this video is like the triad of being a responsible armed citizen. Being able to operate and manipulate your firearm under stress, yes. Hand-to-hand combat combatives, not so much. Medical, I didn't see it. But that triangle right there, if you carry a firearm or you don't, if you go out and you consider yourself the protector of your family, and then medicine, these three things are very, very important to be that well-rounded, responsible citizen, especially if you're carrying a firearm. And looking at this video of these police officers is a prime example of what went wrong.
Yeah. And at one point during it, they talk about, someone says, yeah, I'm holding a tourniquet. So they got a tourniquet on him. That tourniquet saved his life, man. That without question, because it was a dissected femoral artery, and they got the tourniquet on. And
that's awesome. I saw like a clip of it. And so I just saw him go down, and I thought that they had just didn't release the continuation of that dash cam.
No, there's more of it, but it's obviously not aimed at them because he went over the guardrail, and that's where they treated him for a bit. But they show some snippets towards the end of the video, and at one point I hear them talking about moving him back over the guardrail before paramedics and EMTs got there, and I hear him say, "Well, but I'm holding the tourniquet," and then I hear another guy, "Get your knee off of him," which I assume was either to hold the tourniquet on more or to put pressure on that. I also wanted to bring up the restraint of these cops. Like, these guys, man, I would personally, I'm like, the guy at the gas station that got pushed down, I'm like, yeah, if that guy would have taken one step towards him, I think he would have been justified in lethal use of force. But then these cops, they're in a fight for their lives, and they don't go to firearms until the other guy does. And I think that's kind of what society tells us right now. It's kind of what society's doing to our boys in blue, because they have to second guess everything so freaking much. And it even mentions it at the very bottom of this article, some other cases where cops were found guilty for use of force and things like that. And these guys showed amazing and exceptional restraint, because I feel like I would have gone to gun way before that.
Yeah, you're right. The opposite of the story is the guy starts to fight back, they pull out a gun, they shoot him. No cops injured, nothing bad happens, but now they are too quick on the gun, or they're just killers or something like that. It's kind of a lose-lose. Now, Mike said he didn't want to harp on the medical. I'll harp on it for him. Guys, go take a class from Mike.
Yeah.
Right? The object of a gunfight is not to kill the other guy. The object of a gunfight is to keep yourself and your loved ones and other innocent people alive. Now, maybe the only way to do that is to kill the bad guy, but you should realize that that's secondary. So if you don't have training or tools to try and keep yourself alive, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Completely 100% agree. And I mean, a little bit of medical training saved this officer's life, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah, because I can only imagine that they just took a few hours, because I run into most police departments, they get like a couple hours of like their medic or a paramedic in the local area, comes in, shows them how a tourniquet work, and that tourniquet, now I'm hearing, which I'm really glad to hear, saved his life. Mm-hmm. And what was going on with that knee is they were putting pressure on the femoral artery above the tourniquet to help stem the bleeding.
Yeah. That was my guess as well. I obviously couldn't see it, so I'm making some assumptions here based on what I could hear on the dash cam.
Right. Yeah, but that's awesome because gang and everyone listening, and I'm learning this, so I'm excited too. So you can see I'm getting excited about medical. But literally, this cop is alive today because either he or his partner applied that tourniquet, which is so simple to learn how to do. Survive. That's our goal in life, right? Is to survive and take care of our family and get home. Win the day. So.
Yep, could not agree more. Next story is from the I'm Offended files. Parkland investigator says killer could have been stopped if someone with a gun had been there. So this talks about how crazy the shooter is and all that stuff towards the end. But the Florida sheriff leading a state commission on the Parkland High School massacre says there were multiple opportunities to stop Nicholas Cruz during the attack if only someone had confronted him with a gun. So obviously I have to ask, is this aimed at the school resource officer that never entered the building? Is he just looking to get reelected as a sheriff? I don't really know, and I don't think we're going to answer it on this show, but I thought it was interesting. Obviously, most people who are into firearms, 2A, all that stuff, we all kind of think the same thing. Had someone confronted him with a firearm, the day might have ended up differently. This is Sheriff Bob Gualtieri of Pinellas County. He saw surveillance footage taken from inside the school during it and said that Cruz had to stop firing his AR-15 rifle several times in order to reload. What do you guys think here? Mike, I'll start with you.
I mean, it's kind of like duh, right?
Right.
But, someone with a gun, and that's always kind of that sentence that people like to throw out. Someone had a gun. Well, if someone had a gun and was trained on how to use it, because I've seen a lot of people that I call Wyatt Derp.
Yeah.
Just that guy who's like, I've got my gun. And I'm like, all right, cool. Don't be anywhere near me while you're shooting that. So, I agree that, this potentially could have been stopped sooner, someone with a gun. But then I also agree on your end where you're saying, well, is this a dig at the resource officer because he was there with a gun? Mm-hmm. So what are they getting at? And that's unfortunate that it's ambiguous. I wish he would have come out and said, hey, had the gym teacher, been armed, or had a school teacher been armed? Not just this ambiguous, if someone had a gun, could it have been stopped sooner?
Yeah.
Well, sure.
Right. And I think, if he comes out and says, I think all teachers should be armed, that it's actually damaging to him, for a re-election, a thing like that. But I think that we can all pretty much infer that it is either directly related to the SRO or that he really thinks that we should have a lot of armed and trained people inside schools. Ryan?
Well, I think we all agree on this one. I mean, if you're in control over a facility, a school, a building, a movie theater, or something, and you want to have a potential of a mass shooting, then ban guns, right? Because mass shootings only happen in places where guns are banned. So, of course, if someone there could have a gun, it probably wouldn't have happened. We agree with that. More guns, less crime. I'm going to do the shameless Mayday thing again. I use the Parkland as an example for it, Shawn. I'm sorry, but I'm tired of telling people myself, you need to, you can't ban guns. That won't solve anything. And then ending the argument, which is what most gun people do. And you and I just talked about this, Shawn. I want people to have something to say in response. Banning guns won't work. Well, great. If my kids just came to me with negative only responses, I'd get mad at them. So we should get mad at ourselves. We should come back with something positive. Banning guns won't work, but what will? Come up with a solution. The solution I'm trying to do allows any of those teachers at Parkland, that teacher that saw him 200 yards away from the first building, she could have pulled out her smartphone, hit that Mayday button, and within 5-10 seconds, the entire school could have been locked down, and first responders, when they showed up, and school leadership would get to see on their old cool little Mayday safety dashboard exactly who's safe, who's not. Okay, now there's something that can help. I'd still rather have a gun. Give me the choice between a Mayday safety app and a gun, I'll take the gun. But if it's a tool that can maybe help save lives, maybe we should be doing everything we can. I don't know.
No, I'm with you, man.
So can I take that hook that you're throwing out there? I want to know, and this wasn't planned, everyone listening. But so what is this Mayday app, right? So because I'd like to talk about it in my classes as something. So what is this?
Hey, awesome.
And Ryan, just so you guys don't feel guilty about this, I choose the stories based on who the guests are. So I want you guys to talk about what you do.
Well, good.
Yeah.
So Mayday Safety is something that I started about 7-8 months ago. As I sat around, because I've been doing a lot of online training, and one of the conversations I was having with a friend of mine was that how the receptionist at the front of an office building could save more lives if she had a tourniquet and knew how to use it than the AED that's in the cafeteria. And we started talking about that, and also then I started talking about how speed, surprise, and violence of action, which I'll bring up in my full auto news story, wins the day in a fight. You know, how people at churches hiding behind pews don't do anything, but if all the people in church turned around and let out a guttural scream and threw their hymnals at the guy and all attacked him, that they'd probably have a better chance of survival. And we were rolling with all these stories. And I said, you know, the special operations community has this thing we call a Blue Force tracker, which is a map or a display that we can see where all the friendly forces are. And if someone needs help, you can figure out where they're at. And I said, wouldn't it be amazing at a church or a school if you could alert everybody at once that there was a threat, let's say an active shooter, and everybody could push back upstream whether they were injured or whether they weren't, or if they're locked down safe or if they weren't. So you could see, and as you know, Mike, in medicine, sometimes it's more important to know what normal is before you look at abnormal. Sometimes it's more important to know who doesn't need help, but while you're trying to figure out who does need help. And my buddy snapped his fingers. He said, that's it, an app that could do that. So we started it, and we're 7-8 months later now. It's free on iTunes and the Android store for everyone in the world. Get the app, put your family on it, make yourself safer on me, no advertising, no anything. That's it, no catches. You can check in on your family. You can send them a safety request to say, hey, are you okay? And they can respond yes or no. If they get into trouble, they can mash their Mayday button, and you and everyone else in the family, anywhere they are in the world, we've tested this in Jordan, in Africa, all over, instantaneously, you get a little pin with it, where they're at on a map, exactly where they are, and it helps them move so they can see what's going on. And maybe you know or don't, but 911 really has no idea where you're actually at. This helps solve that. The free Mayday app, in addition to your family, also lets everyone nearby you know something's going on. So if you're in the mall, you can start getting a heads up that there's a shooting on the end of the mall and get your butt out of there if you get your family with you. And then the third part that it helps out with is organizations, and it allows your organization to manage the emergency. And that's where we actually try to make the money for the company, is we charge the organization. So you have like a business or a school gets a dashboard. It's really cool. It looks like what you'd expect out of a Hollywood movie. You can see the stuff on our website at maydaysafety.com, and it allows, if something happens, again, the school to get locked down, and then everyone in the organization immediately scatters all across the map as a gray dot where they're currently located. And they slowly but surely start popping back in as red or green, whether they're safe or whether they need help. So now first responders can show up and do some triage immediately in where they need to go. They can poll teachers to see what injuries there are in the classrooms. And they can even communicate directly with the people through the app. I hope it saves lives. Everyone so far has tried to yank it from our hands. We have the weirdest problem in the world, which is we can't keep up with everything. And that's why we think we did the apps for free. So we don't have to keep up with it. Go download it, make your family safe. God bless. And if you think you'd like it for an organization, sure, come see me. We'll figure something out.
That's awesome.
Boom.
Yeah, boom. So this would work like if I, because I'm always calling buddies, right? So New Jersey just had a bunch of flooding where I was at. I had people messaging me, hey, Mike, I know you're teaching over there. You okay? If I literally just hit the ping on Mayday, said, hey, I'm doing good, that would.
Yep, you could do that. We're trying to not design it that way because people have other mechanisms. You could do the Facebook check-in safe or a bunch of other things. You could surely use it that way. We're trying to make it most important for the time between the incident happens and the 20 minutes later when first responders get there, because we need to take charge of our own security. Now, Mike, we have towns and places across the world that don't have their own 911 system that have quickly realized for free they could have a 911 system off of us. Yeah. They can get cheap Android devices and have someone sitting there with an Android device at the hub, and anyone that needs help in the town can hit the button and they know exactly who needs help and where. It's kind of making a new industry and new features we never imagined before. We're excited.
Oh, totally. I have like starred and underlined and boxed and smiley faced because I'm going to be looking at this because that's super cool. I think it's super important. And no, again, for everyone, we didn't have this conversation where Mike, a dark angel, was going to sit there and and brag on it, because I think that's an awesome idea, and I can't wait to share it with some friends in like the security industry and corporate.
Thanks, guys. Everyone go check it out, and if you got feedback for me, good or bad, let me know. We want to make this thing better, and we'd appreciate, of course, reviews. Like, listen to This Week in Guns like you are now and give us a good review on iTunes. But also, if you like the app, give it a good review. If you don't like the app, keep your damned opinion to yourself.
Well, you could go in a closet and yell it. That's fine.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, guys. Next up, we've got the full auto news segment. This is kind of where we just pick one. I'll start off. Man plashes crane. Wait, what did I just say? Man crashes plane into his own house after being arrested for assaulting wife. In Payson, Utah, they got into a tiff, and he assaulted his wife, and got kicked out of the house. And he called the cops and said, "Hey, can I go get some of my stuff?" He got a police escort into his house. Everything was fine. Nothing happened there. And then he went, and he is a pilot, and he got into a plane owned by his employer, and he flew it directly into the house. He died. The wife and the child who were in the house actually got out of the house, and nothing happened. But man, this guy wins the award for spite, I think, for 2018 so far. Crashing a plane into your house, that's pretty ridiculous. I just thought it was so kind of astronomically ridiculous that I wanted to bring it up.
You know what they say, fight or flight.
Yeah.
No.
So yeah, I mean, and it looked like a really nice house too. So it's going to be a pretty big cleanup. I mean,
well, yeah, he owns a plane, so it's gonna be a nice house.
Pretty nuts. All right, let's see, Mike, what was your story?
So the story that surprisingly has taken over the news instead of the New Mexico school shooting camp is a man in Spokane, Washington. He's a man, but he's a mechanic that hopped aboard one of the turboprop planes and decided that he wanted to steal it. Kind of the unfortunate part of this story is this guy lived a good life. Everyone, kind of knew him as a loving husband, loving man, great dude. And for whatever reason, he decided he was going to take his life that day. But I was talking about the wife about this, and we both decided that this is probably the most awesome way to take your life. And so he hopped in a plane and took off on his own, flew over Seattle doing some acrobatic maneuvers. They had to scramble jets from Portland, Oregon, up to make sure that he wasn't up to anything nefarious. The guy on the radio is just like, no, there's people that love me. He's like, I'm just done. And he ended up crashing this airplane. So it's airplane crash news in full auto news segment.
Yeah, definitely. And he purposely went to a place non-populated so that he didn't hurt anyone else, or tried at least his best. In some of the audio recordings, you can hear him say stuff like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. He's like, he went and crashed on an island, just completely unoccupied. And if you want to take away from this with the kind of the firearms moment, because a lot of people are like, well, if we take away guns, we're going to take away a lot of the spur of the moment suicides.
Yeah.
And this guy just got in an airplane and took off. I don't want any suicide. Don't get me wrong here. I'll get vilified and ran out of town with pitchforks. But if you're going to do it, I'd almost rather you do it with a firearm than in an airplane where you could cause more injuries, crash into a building or a highway or something like that. But go seek help. There's lots of hotlines out there, and take care of yourself. Because it's never the answer. It's never as bad as you think, and you can go on to do some awesome things. So don't do that.
Definitely. Any thoughts on that one, Ryan?
I think it highlights how unsecure our airports are.
Truth. Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who worked kind of behind the scenes at the airport, right?
So the rule was he wasn't allowed. No one's allowed to go on an airplane by themselves to mitigate this. So he was already cleared personnel. This wasn't someone that decided, they're standing up there looking at all the airplanes landing and taking off. He threw his bags down and said, I'm going to go take a plane. This was a cleared mechanic who had been doing this for quite some time, which means, we get lax. This is those kind of work standards where your buddy's like, you're like, hey, I'm hopping on the plane. Your buddy's like, nah, you know what? It's good. I'm over here working on this. And so those rules get broken. But unfortunately, those rules are there for a reason. And this is a very, very good indicator of why they need two people on a plane at all times. Because could someone have stopped him from taking his own life that day?
Maybe.
Probably. Maybe.
All right, Ryan, your story.
My story is in Oklahoma City. At an apartment complex, a man went to one of the people that lived in the apartment buildings and asked him for a drink. After the drink, the apartment renter said, you got to leave. The guy asking for the drink pulls out a gun and says, give me everything you have, and tries to rob him. The apartment renter waits for the right time, is able to fight back, and uses the butt of the gun to pretty severely beat the robber in the face before pushing him down a flight of stairs. And I wanted to talk about this story because it goes back to what I mentioned before: speed, surprise, and violence of action. That's how you win a fight. Use whatever tools are necessary, do whatever's necessary, and win the day. And he didn't have to shoot him. I'm not saying that he on purpose had restraint and chose not to shoot him. I have no idea, but sometimes fights go quick. Use what's available, and good on the potential victim here.
Yeah, completely agree. And just never, ever give up. Always. The outcome could be death. They just don't want it to be yours.
Exactly.
Yeah. 100%.
All right, guys, that'll do it for our stories tonight. Before we leave, I wanted to hear kind of what you guys have been up to. Mike, I'm going to start with you.
Well, all right. So it's been a pretty busy couple of weeks. I was down at the Air Force EMT Rodeo, which is the competition for all of the Air Force medics. They had 24 bases.
Wait,
Kadena.
They let you ride Air Force medics?
Heck yes. One of them was doing a terrible job, so I hopped on him. I yelled, yeah, go on, get! And then I slapped him on the butt, and off we went. But yeah, I did that for a week. Ross from Dark Angel and I went down. We were both rocking some sweet Hawaiian shirts, playing some role players. Kadena Air Force Base won that. And then immediately after that, I flew out to New Jersey. And here in 2 days, I'm flying out to Michigan to go teach some more medical classes. One thing that, it's not a shameless plug, it is a plug, is as we talk about these school teachers, as we talk about this school shooting training, as we talk about Mayday, the remainder of the classes for Dark Angel Medical for this year, there are 2 free slots for school teachers. And so we have set aside those slots. I've only taught 1 class this year with school teachers in it. And so if you are a school teacher listening or watching this show, come take a free class. Take a look at what's in your area. We want you to get trained, because whether you want to carry a firearm or not, we want you to at least know some medicine. You can take that back, teach your other teachers, and make sure that you're prepared. So 2 free slots. Just email us at Dark Angel, and we'll make sure that we get you that free class, because I think that that's super, super important.
Definitely. Very cool, man. And where can they find all the stuff you guys do online?
So www.darkangelmedical.com is where you can find everything from trauma kits to locations of trauma training this year, as well as we have some free online training videos that we're updating pretty regularly, where you can kind of see how to use a CAT tourniquet, how to pack a wound, that you can use as kind of filler until you can get yourself into a class, because we want you to be safe now, and then get into a class as soon as you can. Whether it's ours, whether it's a class from Lone Star Medics, whether it's a class from XSA, whether it's a class from Talent Defense, I don't care. And I don't care where you get your medical kit either. I just want you to learn. And that's key, because the whole reason why we're a company is to save lives. So
I love it, man. And I mean, I would suggest buying some good stuff from Dark Angel Medical. I've got the Pocket Dark. I love that thing. So
yeah,
great stuff there. How about you, Ryan?
Well, you guys know what I'm doing, but I need to figure out a way to get Mike's training somehow in the Mayday app, so people can just watch the training right wherever they're at. So, Mike, let's connect after this, man. Let's figure out a way to make that work. And if you guys want to check out what I'm doing, you can go check out RyanCleckner.com. That's kind of my hub that I put together for all activities. If you want to pick up one of the books and give it to someone that needs it as a gift, I'd really, really appreciate it. And of course, MaydaySafety.com, guys. Spread the word. It's only going to work if more and more people get it and use it. I appreciate you guys.
Love it, man. RyanCleckner.com, Dark Angel Medical. Go check them out, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to check out our advertisers, Patriot Patch Company, patriotpatch.co, and Manticore Arms at manticorearms.com. Coupon code TWG10. Go show some support to not only the companies that support this show, but also the panelists that give up their time to be on the show as well. Thank you so much, guys. Truly appreciate you being here. We'll talk to everyone out there next week. And don't forget, This Week in Guns is produced by Kenny Ortega and is a production of the Firearms Radio Network.